In the year 1600, on October 21st, Toyohisa is seen slicing through soldiers on the battlefield in Sekigahara. The commander of the Eastern Army, Fukushima Masanori, wonders why the Shimazu clan is being very persistent. Despite the battle already being decided, the Shimazu clan decided that they were all brainless. While the Shimazu continue to be persistent, Lee Naomasa, the general of the Eastern Army, gets called to help and push them back. With the general in pursuit, Toyohisa asks his uncle to retreat while he remains back to deal with the enemy. Toyohisa flings himself into battle like a suicidal maniac, while buying time for his uncle to retreat to Satsuma. He engages Naomasa in battle. But the general's soldiers quickly come to his aid. This blockhead of a protagonist jumps into the spears that block his way, just to get closer to Naomasa. He pulls out a gun and fires it at him. It seems everyone is suicidal in this era. Naomasa retreats with his soldiers while being severely wounded. Toyohisa then walks back with his injuries in the rain. As he walks to Satsuma, Toyohisa suddenly appears in a white hallway. He sees a man seated at a desk in front of him and a lot of doors by the walls. The man stares at him like some kind of creepy stalker while writing something down on a piece of paper. Suddenly, Toyohisa gets sucked into a portal. He gets dropped off in a foreign place while still bleeding seriously. Some elf brothers come across him and carry his body back to a broken-down castle. One of the elves refers to him as a drifter. As they drop the body, a strange woman who's on a tree points an arrow at them and asks them to explain who he is. The elves are speaking a different language, so the lady finds it hard to understand them. While the elves leave, she suspects Toyohisa might be from the land of the rising sun. She then tells her subordinate, a man with an eye patch who's sitting inside the castle. For some reason, she's very comfortable on that tree. Is she some kind of cave woman? Toyohisa finally wakes up and immediately gets into a scuffle with the man who introduces himself as Oda Nobunaga. The lady comes in to stop them and gives them ducks to pluck so they can make dinner. The way she just changed the mood is baffling. Toyohisa tells Nobunaga that he died 18 years ago, according to his time. The lady then introduces herself as Nasu Suketaka Yoichi, and Toyohisa loses it, saying that his clan existed over 400 years ago. That's an incredibly old, young-looking woman. They both make fun of Toyohisa for being from an unknown clan in the middle of nowhere. Toyohisa tells Nobunaga more about how his clan fell and the war he was fighting. It seems they all met the man in the white hallway before appearing in this unknown land. Meanwhile, a lady is outside, spying on them while communicating with a man through an orb. In a town, the elf brothers are getting scolded for going near the drifters after being told to avoid them. You know, kids always do the opposite of what they're told. Unknown to them, some human soldiers are about to lay waste to the town. Toyohisa and the rest suddenly wake up to the smell of battle. Nobunaga notices that the elven village is under attack. Without a second thought, Toyohisa runs straight for the village. I would have said some sense would be knocked into him, but being at death's door didn't change this guy's meager brain. Nobunaga and Yoichi then join him, and they all come across the elven brothers, who are running away from some soldiers. Nobunaga shoots one of the soldiers, while Toyohisa goes ahead to slice up the rest. Toyohisa's menacing presence wasn't even helping to bring comfort to the kids, even though he just saved their lives. He somehow makes them cry out for help by repeating after him. Now, he's bullying little, helpless kids. Meanwhile, the young girl in white is still following them while reporting to her superior. The elves get taken out of their homes by the human soldiers. The commander tells them it's because they were aiding the drifters. One of the elves speaks out against the commander, but the soldiers just start killing them one by one. The commander told him to curse their existence and spoke about how all demi-humans would soon become extinct. Is everyone in this show just some kind of deranged bully? The commander continues to provoke the elf who spoke up. A soldier then comes to tell him that the wheat fields have been set ablaze. Nobunaga set it on fire as one of his tactics to steal someone's province. I nearly forgot that this is all warlords do. Of course, they weren't concerned about saving the poor elves. Toyohisa goes into the village and starts killing the human soldiers. He treats the whole thing like it's a numbers game. I assumed someone as dumb as him wouldn't know how to count. After he pummels the commander, he goes to an elderly elf and gives him a sword to take revenge for his dead child. When the elf picks up the sword, the rest of the elves follow his lead by taking up weapons. They all surround the commander and send him to his maker. Nobunaga and Yoichi finally join him and give him a seat. Now, the three of them look like a badass trio. The man in the white hallway, Murasaki, gets approached by a lady in black clothes. He tells her to get lost, and that she'll never have her way. She seems to be in control of some people known as Ends, while Murasaki is the one who brings in the drifters. Abe and the Oct magicians stand at the northern wall of Carneades with some Carnadian soldiers. The soldiers feel quite confident about the wall protecting them from whatever enemy they are about to face. Abe leaves one of his men in charge and goes to seek out someone called Kafet. The Oct magicians try to convince the soldiers to hand over command to two old men who are drifters. I understand why the soldiers are refusing, because who wants to put their lives in the hands of someone who's closer to their grave? To make matters worse, one of the old men ends up peeing himself because he can't control his bladder. The other drifter refers to the older one as Hannibal Barca. Hannibal thanks his subordinate, Scipio, for defending him, while the Oct leader says they have to retreat since the fortress is going to fall. Seimu tries to contact the magicians, but they notice that the enemy forces are jamming their communications. The Black King and his army of demi-humans show up and start marching towards the wall. The Cartanian soldiers start attacking with arrows while the Black King sends out his subordinates, Hijikata, Joan of Arc, and Anastasia Romanova. The horde of dragons fly above the wall and turn the soldiers into finely grilled barbecue. This gives the rest of the demi-humans the chance to climb the fortress. A portal suddenly opens up in the air and a plane flies out. Inside is a retarded man, and we have no idea whose side he's on. Hijikata slices open the northern gate and starts killing the soldiers. While Joan of Arc sets the whole place ablaze. I see what they did there. Meanwhile, Anastasia creates blizzards and freezes up the place. The city quickly gets overrun, and the whole place is in flames. Naoshi, the retarded guy on the plane, finally realizes that he should be fighting the army of demi-humans. The Oct leader brings Hannibal and Scipio to two cowboys known as Cassidy and Kid. As they leave, Hannibal tells them that there's still hope of defeating the Black King. They ram through the army of goblins with Cassidy's revolvers and Kid's minigun. They were about to become supper for a dragon. But Naoshi came to their rescue with his fighter plane. He turns the dragons into pieces of meat that could be served raw, if that's your style. Toyohisa and his gang finally catch Seimu, who's been spying on them. They go ahead and instill the fear of the gods in the poor girl. She introduces herself as Ulmanu and says she's a member of the Oct organization. After explaining the whole situation, Toyohisa and the rest couldn't be bothered about any of it. Ulmanu ends up getting tied up by these crazy drifters she encounters. Well, it does give a better view of her wonderful melons. She tells them that she's sure that they're drifters, because those referred to as Ends are no longer seen as humans. The Ends are just a bunch of people filled with hatred due to a tragic event in their past lives. Nobunaga asks her about the army of the Oct, but Ulmanu says they were hoping the drifters would command the armies of the feudal lords in the region. Basically, this stupid magician organization doesn't even have a concrete plan to counter the Black King. Nobunaga tells her that the drifters will aim to conquer the world while her organization supports them. Toyohisa ends up being dragged to become the leader, and the three of them get into an argument. Meanwhile, the Black King receives a report on his losses from Rasputin. He then asks for the wounded troops to be brought to him for healing. He tells Rasputin to spread the word about the fall of the wall in the north. Yeah, this time it doesn't involve the White Walkers from Game of Thrones. After that, he sends the rest of his subordinates to track and kill the rest of the drifters.
And where they need to smuggle the kind, let none.
Yoshitsune, who is with the Black King, continues to remain mysterious and says he'll be joining whichever side is more interesting to him. This one doesn't even have a direction in life. Yoichi enters the elf town as they argue about what to do since their wheat fields have been burned. I'm only just realizing that Yoichi is a male. Why in the world does he then look like that? Ulminu somehow gets blamed when they see that she has a device that lets her communicate in their language. Yoichi fell to her knees and cursed her days for suffering to learn the language of the elves. Ulminu then briefs Nobunaga about the elves. She tells him that they have a strong sense of pride, and this brings joy to the warlord's ears. With the help of Ulminu's talisman, Toyohisa goes to talk to the elves. He riles them up to join him and take the land for themselves. Nobunaga just wants to be the one pulling strings from behind. He ends up arguing with Toyohisa after the boy hits a soft spot by saying that he isn't Nobunaga's son. Even without saying that, these two guys just like fighting stupidly. When the elves reveal their age, Nobunaga and Toyohisa completely lose it, but Ulminu explains the situation to them. Of course, Nobunaga had to grab Ulminu's melons in the first place. Sneaky fool. She explains how the kingdom of Orte has been oppressing and taking the lands of demi-humans. The drifters then decide to help the elves. Toyohisa leads the elves as they plan to slaughter the soldiers who have been lured into the empty town. The human soldiers continue to search the town, but they find no sign of the elves. Yoichi guides the elves as they make bows and arrows. Typical of them. It's just like a basic RPG. They took the armor and swords of the dead soldiers to give to the elves. The dead bodies were placed in a pit by Nobunaga as part of his plan to defeat the Orte soldiers. Ulminu realizes that these drifters view life and death differently from the people in her world. Nobunaga then asks her to bring some sulfur for him. Is this guy trying to create the first atomic bomb? Yoichi continues teaching the elves some archery, but they seem to be quite proficient already. She takes it as a challenge and starts showing off his skills to them. As night approaches, Toyohisa readies the elves for battle. They tell him how their lord comes to collect their women since they can only reproduce once a year. I see the feudal lord must have explicit taste in women. After Toyohisa's speech, the elves were ready to take back their land. The drifter commander, along with some elves, wasted no time killing some soldiers and luring the rest to chase after him. On Nobunaga's orders, they quickly built a barricade and set the place ablaze. The Orte soldiers just kept dropping like pesky flies with no coordination. The soldiers tried retreating.
Right!
But Toyohisa went straight for the captain's head and took it in one slice. The remaining troops fled amidst the chaos that ensued. Toyohisa planned to take the feudal lord's castle immediately, but he had no plans to go about that. Truly, there was only one brain cell working in this guy's head. The remaining troops who fled to the forest fell into Nobunaga's cesspit trap while Yoichi and his archers finished them off. Nobunaga's tactics reminded Yoichi of someone he should be forgetting. The elves and drifters then put on the armor of the soldiers and marched straight for the castle. They quickly went inside and took hold of it. Toyohisa led the elves to save their women. When they entered the dungeon where the women were being held, the sight that met them was enough to stir up unimaginable anger in the calmest of men. Toyohisa decided the soldiers weren't worth sparing and slowly walked forward to deal with them. Nobunaga and his elven troops started pillaging the castle for any documents and maps they could find. He sees a huge portrait of a man, and Ulminu tells him that the man is known as the father of Orte. She didn't know if the man was a drifter, and Nobunaga didn't recognize him. Nobunaga just insulted the guy's mustache because he thinks he has a cooler one. One of the elves comes in to tell Nobunaga that Toyohisa is about to kill the soldiers who were defiling the elven women. Before Toyohisa could give the order, Nobunaga knocked him out and gave the order to kill the soldiers himself. What was even the point of knocking out my boy? Nobunaga felt Toyohisa was too pure to give such an order and wanted to be the one to do all the dirty work. When Toyohisa gets up, he punches Nobunaga immediately and tells him that he couldn't care less about anything he said. The Elvis spared one man, who kept insisting that he had nothing to do with the women. Nobunaga then asks Ulminu to comfort the man with her marvelous melons. She could just come over and comfort me first. With the help of the drifters, word started spreading to other elf villages about how they helped an elven town. Nobunaga sent out a word, which riled the elves to join the drifters in battle. Slowly, Orte started losing their grasp of the elven lands. Nobunaga was doing what he knew best, by being a warlord who was nothing but a serious pain in the butt. Easy didn't find it funny when she got the news of what the drifters had done. While some important figures in Orte discussed the war situation, A freaky-looking man named Saint-Jeremy walks into the room. The guards in the room say that Saint-Jeremy assisted the father of Orte in creating the kingdom. Saint-Jeremy tells the officials about their fleet that has been destroyed and lets them know how messed up they are with the whole revolution going on. You'd think he was about to give them some advice, but this stupid man just wishes them luck and leaves. Meanwhile, the elves were still slowly banding together. Nobunaga was throwing a fit like a little child because Toyohisa had decided to form a council of village elders. Toyohisa tells him it's because he doesn't want to face a situation of betrayal. This causes Nobunaga to recall the numerous betrayals he has faced in his life. This old man has really had it tough. He then received word about the dwarves being able to most likely replicate the gun he had. Yoichi, on the other hand, continues her treacherous training in archery with the elves. The drifters smell something ominous approaching them by night. Joan of Arc and Gilles de Rais are quickly approaching them. Before they have time to react, the drifters and elves get ambushed by Joan of Arc and Gilles de Rais. Nobunaga gets Shara to gather the men while the women and children escape into the forest. Yoichi goes ahead to face Gilles, while Toyohisa faces Joan. Gilles possesses a huge barbaric strength that definitely should have made Yoichi pee his pants. Olminu pops out a stone wall to defend Toyohisa before Joan's flames engulf him. Toyohisa expresses his gratitude by bowing to her. He should have bowed into those massive milkers she has. He also seems to have mistaken Joan for a man. Yoichi and Gilles are still going at it, and he seems to be matching Gilles' barbaric strength. Despite taking hits in many vital spots, Gilles still refuses to go down. Yoshitsune, on the other hand, is just watching the fight between them. Also, why doesn't he just look like a regular guy? Why are the people in this show offsetting their appearances? In the forest, Nobunaga and the elves use the terrain to tackle the cavalry that are chasing them. With their bows and arrows, the elves quickly take down the monsters. All that's left are the actual monsters that Toyohisa and Yoichi are fighting. Joan turns the whole forest into a rotisserie while looking for Toyohisa. The samurai reveals himself and uses Olminu's melons as a launch pad. Sorry, I meant her stone walls. You get what I'm saying. He uses it to launch himself towards Joan and tackle her. He sends her into a well, which makes her recall the time she was being burned alive. Toyohisa finally realizes she's a woman, but immediately slams her head back inside when she tries to retaliate. So much for giving a woman preferential treatment. While Gilles refuses to die and Yoichi starts getting strangled by him. Cassidy and his drifter group show up there. Kid uses his minigun to turn the immortal monster into minced meat. Some goblins use the commotion to rescue Joan from the well. Gilles finally shrivels up and turns to salt, according to Abe. The Oct leader then introduces himself to Nobunaga. Yoshitsune starts mocking Yoichi for trying to fight Gilles in a one-on-one battle. Yoichi searches frantically for him, but Yoshitsune just says they'll meet again and doesn't reveal himself. Nobunaga recognizes Abe's name and calls him Abe no Seimei. Toyohisa, on the other hand, doesn't recognize who Abe is. The diviner's pride ends up getting hurt by this blockhead who calls himself a samurai. Abe tells them that he also met Murasaki and was brought to this world. They head back to the well where Toyohisa left Joan and find out that she's no longer there. Toyohisa let her go because he has a rule against taking the head of a woman. Well, this woman will soon turn him into a roasted piglet. Olminu wonders who the deranged old man on the wagon is, and it's none other than Hannibal. Abe tells her that while they were running away from the enemy, Scipio fell out of the wagon, and they couldn't go look for him. It seems Scipio's presence is the only thing keeping Hannibal a bit sane. Now, he's just a senile old man with a dysfunctional bladder. Scipio wanders the forest aimlessly and comes across Nayoshi's plan and a group of wolf monsters. By some kind of miracle, Nayoshi had tamed them to serve him. Just what kind of diabolical method did this retarded man use to achieve this? Scipio couldn't be bothered by what the barbarian was saying. They end up getting into a fight when Scipio says the word Rome. Nobunaga is busy falling in love with the cowboys' guns, especially the Gatling gun. Unfortunately, Abe tells him that they haven't found any smiths capable of replicating the gun. Someone from the Oct organization then approaches to bring the sulfur that Nobunaga asked for. He plans to make black powder with it. Abe gets really weary of him and decides that Nobunaga needs an extra eye on him. What's a diviner really going to do against a maniac like Nobunaga? The warlord plans to free dwarves and form an alliance with the countries that have been at war with Orte. He wants to go ahead and even establish a multi-racial federation. He's really going at it with the whole world conquering things. He wants to make Toyohisa the emperor of the federation since he believes that he's not fit for the role. Toyohisa goes to Hannibal to test out if his battle sense is still in place, and luckily, it is. He then goes to tell the elves that he's saving the dwarves, and that only true warriors should join him. It's no surprise that elves and dwarves don't get along, but let's not forget that Toyohisa has only one working brain cell. Nobunaga chases after him because he feels the boy is about to ruin his plans. But the elves show up to support Toyohisa, despite their feud with the dwarves. Cassidy gives Nobunaga a revolver and also leaves the Gatling gun behind. Now, he's like a child who just got some candy. In the city of Godulka, the dwarves are being overworked to produce more weapons and armor for the army of Orta. While the soldiers discuss, the drifters and elves ambush the place by throwing explosives. Hopefully, it doesn't end up killing the dwarves they came to save.
Under attack!
The soldiers try to escape, but Toyohisa stops them in their tracks. He uses the chaos caused by the explosives to instill more fear in the soldiers. Yoichi also takes out the guards that are in a tower. Thanks to Nobunaga, they're all making use of the explosives efficiently. The elves even go further to confuse the soldiers by acting as allies within the smoke. Poor soldiers really never had a chance. As Toyohisa charges for the castle, the armored guardians of Orte approach him. He uses Olmenu's stone wall to keep the guardians trapped. Then the elves toss in the explosives and blow them up. Unfortunately, the castle guards begin to close the gate to the town. I thought Toyohisa was going to just jump into it like the suicidal runt he is. Hannibal makes some hand gestures to Nobunaga, who quickly understands what he means. Nobunaga uses the orb to talk to Olmenu and tells her to use her stone charms together with the elven arrows. With that technique, they end up creating a path along the walls of the castle. Nobunaga starts feeling like the coolest kid in town as he marvels at how the drifters use these items, which are new to them. As they go to free the dwarves, they're met with a sight that doesn't live up to the tales they were told as kids. The dwarves all looked dejected and on the verge of death. Toyohisa decided to feed the dwarves first before going on to take the castle. Nobunaga finally loses hope in this stupid boy who was supposed to be an emperor. How could he possibly be feeding prisoners in front of the enemy? To make it worse, Toyohisa was even killing the horses to add to the stew. Nobunaga then tells Olmenu that the dwarves should be given rice porridge so that they don't die from heavy food. Toyohisa gives the remaining soldiers a last chance to surrender before the dwarves finish eating. The soldiers end up surrendering, but he says he's going to kill the lord of the castle since he surrendered. It's supposed to be according to some kind of samurai honor. The lord refuses, so Toyohisa quickly takes his head before he even has time to react. This guy is fond of taking a lot of heads, but I doubt he gets any. Meanwhile, Doug and a member of the Oct are spying on the Black King. They notice the Bronze Dragon, which is one of the 6 great dragons, and it seems to have joined the army of the Black King. The demi-humans there have also started farming and trying to start a civilization of their own. The Bronze Dragon confronts the Black King and says that he has underestimated the power of dragonkind. The Black King talks back to the dragon and says that it's no more than a starving goblin child. Who thought this guy would throw out jabs like this? The dragon tries to attack, but the Black King uses his powers to create some tumors on the dragon's skin, and they start melting. With that, the dragon surrenders and joins the Black King's army. He goes ahead and displays more of his power by replicating food seeds. He has the power to replicate the cells of any living thing, which is so cool and completely scary. He could just decide to create a pandemic, and it's 2020 all over again. At the end of the day, the Black King has the same plans for creating his own civilization consisting of demi-humans. Meanwhile, Saint Germain comes to an elven settlement and is greeted by Mills, who was a former tax assessor. Mills tells him that the drifters have left to go save the dwarves. Thanks to feeding them, The dwarves have finally gotten back to their original selves. Now, they're just using Olmenu as a waitress because of her beautiful melons. I wonder if they also take milk. Nobunaga then shows his musket to the dwarves for them to replicate. He sees the musket as a path for more people to become soldiers. It always comes back to his lust for conquest. Joan finally wakes up with Anastasia by her side. She wants to rush out immediately to avenge Gilles. But Anastasia tells her that she'll be allowed to take her revenge at the right time. You see why Toyohisa should have just ended the crazy woman. After a day, the dwarves finally remake the first musket. They tell Nobunaga that they can produce up to 10 per day at their full strength. Toyohisa is out with some younger dwarves who also want to join in on the fighting. You really can't tell who's young or old between these dwarves. It's like they were all born with beards. Saint Germi and his goons finally catch up to the drifters and approach them. Germi lets them know that he's a drifter who helped Adolf Hitler create the Orte Empire. The Empire's story is slowly starting to make sense with that name. World conquest was like a hobby for the father of the Orte Empire. Germi's underlings start to attack Toyohisa, but lose the will to fight at the sight of Hannibal and Yoichi. There can be a reasonable excuse for Yoichi, but Hannibal is just all wrong. These guys are sick in the head. With the defeat of his underlings, Saint-Germain offers to sell the Orte Empire to the drifters. Saint-Germain returns to the capital of Orte with the other drifters. It seems Saint-Germain is from far in the future and knows all about the other drifters. He offers to tell Toyohisa what happened in the war after he died. But Toyohisa just says what he thinks the outcome was. Like a brick wall, his sense is impenetrable. Saint-Germain then goes ahead to assemble the lords of Orte, and he tells them that Orte will be shutting down business. They would start anew and pursue new goals with Toyohisa as their leader. One of the lords tries to call for the guards, but Yoichi is making quick work of them. It was all going according to plan until Saint-Germain noticed Rasputin was controlling one of the politicians in the room. As the drifters enter the room, some of the Black King's soldiers follow suit and surround them. Trust Toyohisa to quickly turn the goblins into freshly cut meat, and he even offers up prayers for them. He and Nobunaga end up making a fool out of Rasputin in the process. The Black King tells Rasputin and Hijikata to destroy the capital city, Verlina, if they can't take over it. I didn't expect him to be so petty. Nobunaga and Saint-Germain get into an argument because Germi didn't send enough soldiers. When the soldiers he even sent arrived in the city, you just knew there was no hope for Orte right from the beginning. He really had to pick a bunch of mentally ill men. According to Toyohisa, they seemed to be capable enough to be soldiers, but I wasn't buying it. Nobunaga goes ahead to explain why they would be killing the enemy and not just defending the city. Toyohisa, Yoichi, and Nobunaga take command of different battalions and prepare for the upcoming battle. The Black King's army storms the city and is greeted by shots of muskets. From there, Yoichi and the elves begin to rain down arrows on them. A second volley of muskets fires at the enemy, which further puts them in fear. Lastly, Toyohisa and his foot soldiers charge in to slice them up. Toyohisa and his dwarves run through the army like a hot knife through butter. Nobunaga continues to keep communication between him, Olmenu, and Yoichi through the magical orb. Hijikata orders his troops to retreat and break up into smaller units. Olmenu tells Nobunaga about what's going on, but he still senses that there's something off. Hijikata then confronts Toyohisa, and he seems to hold a grudge against the Shimazu clan. Just what did Toyohisa do again? With Hannibal's weird and deranged gestures, Nobunaga figures out what the army is trying to do. Yoichi helps him confirm that the enemy is moving in a disordered manner. But there's still a pattern to it. With that information, Nobunaga concludes that they still have plans to conquer the Orte kingdom and not lay waste to it. Toyohisa continues to fight Hijikata and his band of ghosts. His attacks go straight through the ghosts, but their attacks are able to harm him. Why do these Ends guys all have supernatural powers? That's just cheating. Toyohisa resorts to mocking Hijikata while breaking through windows to get closer and attack him. He continues to keep Hijikata busy while Nobunaga lures the enemy troops and waits to dispose of them. Hijikata completely loses it and lets loose, which leaves Toyohisa to sustain serious injuries. By the time Hijikata realized what was happening, his troops had been cornered and set ablaze due to Nobunaga's strategy. You really have to give it to these feudal lords. Despite their stupidity, they really know how to play the war game. Toyohisa told Hijikata how he bought enough time for Nobunaga to succeed. The dwarves show up and fire at Hijikata's ghost, while Toyohisa just stands there in the middle of the gunfire. Seriously, How suicidal or crazy do you have to be? The Black King reaches out to Hijikata and tells him to withdraw, but the Shimazu scum tackles him. Their fight turns into a full-on brawl, and even their subordinates don't know what to do. The Black King insists that Hijikata should retreat, so a dragon shows up to carry him away. What a useless coward. Toyohisa tells him to come down and continue their fight, but Hijikata just ignores him and flies away. Toyohisa finally collapses due to his accumulated exhaustion. The drifters were able to take control of Orte, but their battle with the Ends was far from over. Koreto Mitsuhide ends up joining the Black King's army so that he can put an end to Nobunaga. That's all, folks. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing content.